Julian left me stranded in a desolate lavender field, the Provencal heat beating down as he sped away in our rental convertible. He laughed, shouting that I needed to learn independence while he drove off to meet his mistress in Monaco. He left me with no money and a phone with 15% battery, thinking he had discarded a helpless housewife. He has no idea I own the very land beneath his tires. My name is Alara, and until 10 minutes ago, I was simply the annoying weight in the passenger seat of a rented convertible. The southern French sun beat down on the back of my neck, a relentless, dry heat that felt suffocating against the leather interior. The air smelled of wild thyme and dust, but inside the car, the atmosphere was frozen solid. Julian had not spoken to me for an hour, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel, his jaw set in that tight, cruel line I had learned to fear over the last 3 years. We were surrounded by endless rows of lavender, a sea of purple stretching out toward the horizon. It was beautiful, but it felt desolate. We were at least 20 kilometers from the nearest village. Suddenly, Julian swerved onto the gravel shoulder, the tires crunching loudly in the silence. "What is it?" I asked, my voice small. "The rear tire," Julian snapped, not looking at me. "It feels off. Get out and check it. I do not want to get grease on my vacation slacks." I hesitated, but the glint in his eyes told me not to argue. I unbuckled my seatbelt and stepped out into the blinding afternoon sun. The heat hit me like a physical blow. I walked to the rear of the vehicle, crouching down to inspect the rubber. "Julian, it looks fine to me." The engine roared. I barely had time to jump back as the car screeched forward, kicking up a cloud of white dust that filled my lungs. I coughed, waving my hands desperately, watching the convertible tear away down the narrow road. Through the settling dust, I heard the distinct tinny sound of laughter blaring from the car speakers. He was on a call with his friends. "Find your own way back," Julian screamed over the wind, his arm hanging casually out the window. "Consider it a lesson. Maybe it will teach you not to ruin my vibe." I stood frozen, watching the red taillights disappear around a bend. My hands went to my side, clutching for my purse, but my fingers grasped only air. It was still in the footwell of the car. He had my passport. He had my wallet. He had every credit card. I dug into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen flickered to life, showing a battery icon at 15%. Panic began to rise in my throat, hot and acidic, but it was not for me. My blood ran cold as I thought of the damp, peeling hotel room back in the last town, the one Julian had insisted was authentic charm. My daughter, Sophie, was there. She is only 5 years old. She was with a babysitter the hotel had recommended, but Julian had the only key to the room. My phone buzzed in my hand, a text message from Julian. "Heading to Monaco with the boys for a few days. Do not call. I blocked your number. Figure it out yourself so you learn who the real head of this family is." I stared at the screen. The tears that had been threatening to spill suddenly evaporated. The trembling in my hands stopped. For years, I had played the role of the submissive, grateful wife, hiding my true identity to ensure he loved me for me, not my inheritance. I had let him gaslight me, belittle me, and control the finances I secretly provided. But leaving me was one thing. Leaving Sophie alone in a strange country while he went to party, that was an act of war. The fear vanished, replaced by a cold, hard clarity that I had not felt since I sat in the boardroom 5 years ago. I did not call the police. I did not call a taxi. I tapped a hidden app on my phone interface and dialed a number that did not exist in any public directory. It rang once. "Yes." A deep, professional voice answered. It was Henri, the CEO of Sterling Group's European division. "Henri," I said, my voice steady and devoid of the housewife tremolo Julian loved to mock. "It is Ilara." There was a pause, Then the sound of a chair being pushed back urgently. Madame Sterling, we thought you were unreachable. Activate Protocol Phoenix, I commanded, looking at the empty road where my husband had abandoned me. I am at latitude 43.8 north. Send the helicopter immediately. And Henri, I want you to freeze every single asset accessible to Julian Thorne. Total lockdown. Understood, madam. 5 minutes. I stood tall in the lavender field, the scent of flowers now mixing with the smell of impending retribution. In the distance, the rhythmic thumping of rotor blades broke the silence of the countryside. A sleek, black helicopter appeared over the ridge, the silver sterling logo gleaming on its side, as it descended, whipping the purple flowers into a frenzy. Alara the housewife died in that field. Alara Sterling had returned. The helicopter touched down on the private helipad of Villa Lumiere, perched high in the hills above Nice. The transition was jarring. Less than an hour ago, I had been standing in the dirt, sweating and humiliated. Now, the cool, conditioned air of my family's estate hit my face as the glass doors slid open. A team of 6 people stood in a perfect line waiting for me. They were not just staff. They were the best legal and security minds in Europe, and they all worked for me. "Welcome home, Madame Sterling," Henri said, bowing his head slightly. "We have prepared the operations room." I walked past him, my heels clicking on the marble floor with a rhythm that sounded like gunfire. "The operations room can wait. Priority 1 is Sophie." I turned to Pierre, the head of my personal security detail. "She is at the Motel des Fleurs, 20 kilometers outside of Avignon, room 214. A babysitter is watching her, but Julian has the key. I want a team there immediately." "We have a tactical unit 5 minutes away, madame," Pierre replied instantly. "Good," I said, my voice trembling slightly for the first time. "Bring her here. But Pierre, do not scare her. Buy her ice cream. Tell her mommy has a big surprise and we are going to a castle. She must not know anything about what her father did today." "Consider it done," he said, stepping away to issue orders into his earpiece. With my daughter's safety in motion, the mother in me receded, and the CEO stepped forward. I marched into the command center, a room lined with monitors usually reserved for tracking global shipping lanes. Today, every screen was focused on one man. On the main wall, a satellite feed showed a blue dot moving through the streets of Monaco. Next to it, a live stream of financial data scrolled rapidly. "He is arriving at Le Grand Hotel now," Henri noted, pointing to the center screen. I watched as the familiar facade of Le Grand appeared. It was the jewel of Monte Carlo, a place where billionaires came to play. It was also one of the first properties I had acquired when I took over the chairmanship at 22. Julian had no idea. To him, I was just Alara, the girl he met at a coffee shop, the girl with the modest trust fund and no business sense. I had hidden my empire to find a man who wanted me, not my money. I had quietly pulled strings to get him his job, anonymously recommended his logistics company for contracts, and even topped up his bank account when he made bad investments. I made him feel like a king so he would never feel threatened by me. "And there is the company," I muttered. On the surveillance feed from the hotel lobby, Julian walked in. He was not alone. Hanging on his arm was Clara, his 24-year-old secretary. She was wearing a sundress I had seen him browsing online last week. "Transaction alert," an analyst called out from the corner. He just used the Onyx card at the hotel boutique. A handbag. 4,500 euros. I let out a short, dry laugh. Of course he did. Julian believed that card was a supplementary account he had graciously opened for me, his dependent wife. In reality, it was linked to a private account I funded every month to massage his ego. He was buying his mistress gifts with my money. "Sir," the analyst continued, "he is telling the concierge that he is celebrating a big business win. He claims he just taught his wife her place." My hands clenched into fists on the leather table. Is that so? Shall we decline the card, Madame? Henri asked, his finger hovering over a keyboard. We can embarrass him right now. We can have security throw him out. No, I said softly. I watched Julian on the screen. He looked so confident, so arrogant, laughing as he handed the bellboy a tip. If I crushed him now, he would just be a victim of a banking error. I needed him to be destroyed. I needed him to fly so high that the fall would shatter every bone in his reputation. Call the hotel manager, I ordered. Tell him Mr. Thorne is our lucky guest of the month. Upgrade him to the presidential suite. Comp the room. Send up the most expensive champagne we have. Henri looked at me, surprised, but he nodded. The presidential suite, very well. On the screen. I saw the manager approach Julian. I saw Julian's chest puff out as he heard the news. He turned to Clara, beaming, probably telling her that his charm had worked its magic. He looked like a man who owned the world. I picked up a glass of vintage Bordeaux that a steward had placed beside me. I swirled the dark red liquid, watching the man I had vowed to love forever lead another woman into my elevator. Let him enjoy his last supper, I whispered, and took a sip. It was time to play the victim one last time. I sat in the high-backed leather chair of the command center, the blue light of the monitors reflecting in my eyes. I picked up an unregistered burner phone and typed a message with trembling fingers, not because I was afraid, but because I needed to get into character. I managed to walk to the village. It is dark and I am so scared. Julian, please answer me. I hit send. On the large central screen, the live feed from the security camera in the VIP lounge of Le Grand Hotel showed Julian's phone lighting up on the table. He picked it up, read the message, and then laughed. He actually laughed. He turned the screen toward Clara and his friends. I could not hear his exact words through the camera, but I saw the way Clara covered her mouth to giggle and the way his friends clinked their beer glasses in a toast. A moment later, my burner phone buzzed. Not enough yet, babe. Talk to me when I get back. Do not disturb the breadwinner while he is working. I stared at the text, my expression flat. He thinks cruelty is a leadership skill, I said to Henri, who was standing by the door. Let us see how he handles a real shark. Deploy the Baron. It was time for the theater to begin. I had instructed my chief financial officer to create a digital footprint for a man who did not exist, Baron von Schroeder, a reclusive Austrian investor looking for opportunities in Monaco. The man playing him was Thomas, a Royal Shakespeare Company actor I had hired for corporate training years ago. I watched on the monitor as Thomas, looking impeccable in a tuxedo and a monocle that should have been ridiculous but somehow worked, approached Julian at the roulette table in the casino Monte Carlo. Excuse me, Thomas said, his voice booming with aristocratic authority. I could not help but notice your betting style. Aggressive, calculated. You have the aura of a man who builds empires. Julian swallowed the bait whole. He straightened his jacket, sucking in his stomach. You could say that, Julian replied, putting on his deepest voice. Julian Thorne, CEO of Thorne Logistics. Thorne Logistics. Thomas raised an eyebrow. I believe I have heard of it. A titan in the supply chain industry. Yes. It was a lie. Julian's company was a small, failing firm that only stayed afloat because I secretly directed Sterling Group subsidiaries to use his trucks. But Julian nodded eagerly. We are expanding rapidly. Global reach. Fascinating, Thomas said, leaning in. I represent a consortium looking to inject capital into exactly that kind of firm. We are talking about 50 million euros in liquid investment. Julian choked on his drink. 50 million. I am hosting a private gala on my yacht tomorrow evening. Thomas continued smoothly. Bring your paperwork. If I like what I see, we sign the deal then and there. While Julian was busy hyperventilating with excitement, I turned to my legal team. Activate the debt clauses, I ordered. Contact the banks holding the loans for his company. Tell them we have received intelligence about his insolvency. I want his credit lines frozen by morning." My phone rang. It was Julian. I cleared my throat, pitching my voice up an octave to sound shrill and desperate. "Julian. Oh, thank God. Are you coming to get me? Listen to me, Alara." Julian's voice came through, loud and slurred with alcohol. "I am about to change our lives. I just met a baron. A real baron. He is going to give me 50 million euros. That is amazing," I stammered. "But Julian, the hotel room here is so cold and I have no money for food." "Stop whining," he snapped. "I am doing this for us. When this deal goes through, you will be on your knees thanking me for not divorcing you. You will realize how useless you are without me." I looked down at the document on my desk. It was a repossession order for the luxury rental car he was currently driving. I uncapped my pen. "Yes, Julian. You are the best," I said, letting a fake sob catch in my throat. "I am nothing without you. Please, just do not abandon me and Sophie." I signed the paper with a flourish. "Ilara Sterling. Just stay put and stop embarrassing me," Julian said. "I have big business to handle." The line went dead. I looked up at the screen one last time. Julian turned to Clara, pulling her close for a kiss. "See," he told her, his face flushed with triumph. "Women need to be afraid. That is the only way they learn to be good." I set the phone down gently. "Operation Repo is a go," I told Henri. "Take the car." The next morning, I sat in the command center of Villa Lumiere, watching the financial destruction of my husband play out in real time. It was almost hypnotic. On the main screen, a map of Monaco was lit up with transaction markers as Julian dragged his mistress, Clara, from one luxury boutique to another. He was preparing for the Baron's Gala, and he was determined to look the part of a billionaire. Even if he had to spend money, he did not technically have. He just spent 3,000 euros at a designer shoe store, Henri reported, his eyes scanning the data stream. And another 2,000 at a suit tailor for an express fitting. "Let him," I said, sipping my espresso. "He thinks he is using the credit limit of the company card. He does not realize that I updated the terms of service 3 months ago. Every cent he spends today is being cross-collateralized against his personal assets. That 3,000 euros just put a lien on his beloved bachelor pad in Miami." Julian was quite literally wearing his house on his feet. The spending spree hit a snag at a high-end jewelry store near the casino square. I switched the video feed to the store's internal security camera, another property in the Sterling retail portfolio. I saw Julian slamming his hand on the glass counter. "What do you mean, declined?" Julian shouted, his face turning a blotchy red. "That is a black card. Run it again." "You incompetent fool." The sales associate looked terrified. "Sir, the system says—" "I do not care what the system says," Julian roared, causing other customers to look over. "I am about to close a deal worth 50 million euros. Do you think I cannot afford a stupid bracelet?" I watched him sweat. He was terrified of looking poor in front of Clara, who was pouting by the mirror. "Override the block," I commanded quietly. "Give him a 5-minute window. Make him think it was just a glitch. If we stop him now, he might panic and run. I need him to feel invincible." Henri typed a command. "The card is active." On the screen, the transaction went through. Julian smirked, snatching the receipt. "See, I told you it was your machine. Next time, show some respect." But Clara was not done. She pointed to a diamond ring in the display case, a gaudy thing that cost more than Julian made in 2 years. "Baby," she whined, tugging on his lapel. "If you really love me, and since you are going to be so rich—" Julian hesitated. I could see the gears turning in his head. The credit card was maxed out even with my override. He looked at the ring, then at Clara, and then he pulled out his phone. "I am going to make a transfer," he whispered to the clerk. thinking he was being discreet. I have a private savings account. My retirement fund. I raised an eyebrow. That was the nest egg he had been hiding from me for our entire marriage. The money he swore he did not have when I asked for help with Sophie's tuition. He was liquidating his entire future for a woman he had known for 3 months, all to impress a fake baron. He just wired the full balance. Henri confirmed. $140,000. Gone. He just burned his only life raft, I said, feeling a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. When I am done with him, he will wish he had saved that for bail money. As they left the store, Julian's phone buzzed. I saw him stop on the sidewalk. His friends, who had been trailing behind him carrying the shopping bags, looked worried. Julian, man, maybe you should slow down, one of them said. This is a lot of cash. You guys have no vision, Julian scoffed, waving them off. Small risks, small rewards. I am playing in the big leagues now. He checked his email. I knew exactly what he was reading because I had written it myself. Mr. Thorne. The Baron requests a private audience before the gala to finalize the terms. Meet at the Old Cellar on Rue de la Paix at 7 o'clock. Strict protocol. No phones, no recording devices, no entourage. Come alone. This is how the elite do business. Julian looked up, his eyes shining with greed. He turned to Clara. Baby, you go back to the hotel. I have a secret meeting. This is it. The big time. He hailed a taxi, adjusting his new tie, completely unaware that he was not heading to a boardroom, but to his own execution. I sat at the antique desk in the villa's library, typing the final nail into Julian's coffin. It was an email, crafted with the pathetic desperation of the woman he thought I was. My dearest Julian, I have been thinking all night in this cold room. You were right. I have been ungrateful. I know how hard you work for us, and I am so sorry I ruined your trip. I will try to be better. Please just come back to me. I hit send. It was the perfect bait. In a divorce court, this email would look like an admission of guilt and stability issues on my part. It gave him exactly what he needed to feel safe. On the surveillance monitor, I saw Julian check his phone in the hotel lobby. A smug grin spread across his face. He showed the screen to his friends, shaking his head with mock pity. Then, he forwarded it. I knew exactly where it was going to his lawyer. Mr. Blackwood. What Julian did not know was that Blackwood had been on the Sterling payroll for a decade. The divorce papers they were drafting would strip Julian of everything, and he was walking right into it, thinking he held all the cards. It was time to dress for the finale. I bypassed the evening gowns hanging in the closet. Tonight was not about beauty. It was about execution. I chose a tailored white suit, sharp enough to cut glass, with a silk blouse underneath. I pulled my hair back into a severe, tight bun. When I looked in the mirror, Alara the housewife was gone. The woman staring back was the predator. Before leaving, I went to the playroom. Sophie was building a tower of blocks, safe and happy. I knelt beside her. Sophie, look at me, I said softly, smoothing her hair. Daddy is going to be on a very long business trip. He might not be back for a long time. Sophie blinked, her big eyes curious but unsure. Will he be okay? He has chosen his path, I said carefully. But you and I, we are going to have a wonderful new life. Just the two of us. A big adventure. Okay, Mommy, she chirped, turning back to her blocks. I walked out of the room and signaled to Henri. Status. Target is moving, Henri replied, but he is having some transportation issues. On the screen, Julian was storming around the luxury rental car outside the hotel. He was pressing the key fob repeatedly, but the engine remained dead. I had instructed the rental agency, another subsidiary, to remotely disable the ignition. Open this door, Julian screamed at the valet, kicking the tire. It is broken. This is unbelievable. I am sorry, sir. The system is locked, the valet said, backing away. "It is her," Julian muttered, his face twisted in rage. "Even when she is not here, she is bad luck. I bet she is sending negative energy my way." He was losing his composure. Clara, standing nearby in a cocktail dress, looked at him with disdain. She was a gold digger, and she could smell that the gold was starting to tarnish. "I am not going with you like this," Clara said, crossing her arms. "You look crazy, Julian. I am going to the spa. Call me when you calm down." "Fine," Julian yelled. "Stay here. I do not need you to close this deal." He flagged down a taxi and threw himself into the back seat. As the taxi pulled away, I turned to Henri. "Clara is staying behind. Perfect," I said. "Lock her out of the room. And call the Monaco police. Report that the credit card used to book the presidential suite and the spa treatments was stolen. Tell them the thief is currently in the massage therapy center." "With pleasure," Henry said. Julian arrived at the meeting point 10 minutes later. It was an old wine cellar on the outskirts of the city, a place of stone walls and heavy shadows. He paid the driver and adjusted his tie, trying to regain his arrogance. He walked down the stone steps, into the darkness. There was only a long wooden table in the center of the room, illuminated by a single dim light. "Hello," Julian called out, his voice echoing off the damp walls. "Baron, I am here." He sat at the table, checking his watch. He thought he was early for a secret society meeting. He had no idea he was sitting in a cage, and I was holding the key. The air in the wine cellar was damp and smelled of centuries-old mold. I watched from the hidden camera feed in the security room next door for exactly 30 minutes. Julian shifted in his chair, checking his watch every 10 seconds. The arrogance that had fueled him in Monaco was leaking out of him, replaced by the twitchy anxiety of a man who realized he was out of his depth. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number for the Baron. I watched him listen to the voicemail recording, his face paling. "Pick up," he muttered, tapping the screen aggressively. "Pick up." It was time. I nodded to Pierre. "Go." The heavy oak doors of the cellar groaned open. Julian jumped to his feet, a smile plastered on his face, ready to greet his savior. But instead of an Austrian aristocrat, 6 of my most imposing security operatives marched in. They wore black tactical suits and moved with silent precision, lining up against the stone walls like statues. They did not look at him. They just stared straight ahead. Who are you?" Julian stammered, backing away until his legs hit the wooden chair. "Where is the Baron? Is this a robbery?" He looked around wildly, his eyes darting to the exit, calculating a run for it. But the doorway was blocked. Then I stepped into the light. The sound of my stilettos echoed against the vaulted ceiling. Click, click, click. It was a sharp, violent rhythm. I walked slowly, savoring the moment. I stopped at the head of the table, just outside the circle of light, and let the silence stretch until I could hear his shallow breathing. "Hello, darling," I said, my voice smooth and dangerously calm. "Enjoying the trip." Julian squinted into the gloom when I stepped forward, allowing the dim light to illuminate my face. His jaw literally dropped. He blinked rapidly, as if his brain refused to process the image. He was looking for the disheveled woman in the denim shorts he had left in the dust. Instead, he found a woman in a bespoke white suit that cost more than his car, with diamonds at her throat and ice in her eyes. "Ilara?" He breathed out. Then, the shock curdled into his usual sneering defensiveness. He let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. "What the hell are you doing here stalking me? Did you track my phone?" He crossed his arms, trying to regain the upper hand. "If you came all this way to beg me to take you back, you are going to have to do better than this cheap theatrics. And who are these guys' actors?" I did not say a word. I simply reached into my briefcase and pulled out a thick leather-bound dossier. I tossed it onto the table. It slid across the wood with a heavy hiss and stopped right in front of him. "Read it," I commanded. "I am not reading your divorce papers. Elara," he spat. "I have a lawyer for that." "It is not a divorce settlement," I said. "It is a deed of ownership." He frowned, his hand hovering over the folder. He flipped it open. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. I watched the color drain from his face, leaving him a sickly shade of gray. This says you own this building," he whispered, "and the hotel, and—" He looked up, his voice trembling. "Orion Systems." "You do not work for Orion Systems, Julian," I said, stepping closer until I was towering over him. "Orion is a shell company, a Level 4 subsidiary. It exists solely to manage minor logistical assets for a much larger entity." I leaned down, placing my hands flat on the table. "You work for the Sterling Group, and I am Sterling." Julian froze. He looked at me, then at the papers, his mind fracturing under the weight of the truth. He shook his head violently. No, he stammered, backing away. "You are lying. You are Elara. Your dad sold used books online. He was a failure. You are a nobody." "My father built the largest e-commerce infrastructure in the hemisphere," I corrected him coldly. "He just preferred privacy over fame. Unlike you." I pulled a small remote from my pocket and pointed it at the far wall. The projector hummed to life, casting a bright blue image onto the ancient stones. It was a complex corporate structure, a web of companies that spanned the globe. At the very top was my name. Below it, a net worth estimation that read, $5 billion. "I bought your pathetic logistics company 5 years ago," I said, my voice echoing in the chamber. "You were bankrupt. You were going to lose everything. I bought it anonymously to keep you employed. Every promotion, every bonus, every big break you thought you earned. It was me signing the checks." It cannot be," Julian gasped, clutching his chest as if he couldn't breathe. You were home cooking dinner." "I was running an empire from my laptop while the pot roast simmered," I said. "And you were too busy staring at yourself in the mirror to notice." For a moment, the silence in the cellar was absolute. Then, Julian exploded. The shock morphed into a cornered, animalistic rage. He slammed his fist onto the table, shaking the projector screen. You entrapped me," he screamed, his face twisting into an ugly mask. "This is fraud. You lied to me for our entire marriage. You pretended to be poor to test me. That is sick. Elara, you are the one who violated our vows." I did not flinch. I simply pressed a button on the remote. The corporate org chart on the wall vanished, replaced by a high-definition video. It was footage from the dashcam of the rental car, a feature Julian did not even know existed. On the screen, the lavender fields of Provence stretched out under the sun. We watched as Julian shoved me out of the car. We watched him drive away. Then, the audio cut to the interior of the car. "Finally got rid of the dead weight." Julian's recorded voice boomed through the cellar speakers. "God, she is pathetic." "Once I close this deal with the Baron, I am filing the papers. I will kick her to the curb and take full custody. She cannot afford a lawyer anyway." Julian stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "I am not the victim here," he sputtered, trying to find a defense. "I was just blowing off steam. I did not mean it." "You are not a victim, Julian," I said, my voice cutting through his excuses. "You are a delusional parasite." I walked around the table, circling him like a shark. "And about that deal with the Baron, there is no Baron. Thomas is an actor I hired from London. But here is the interesting part." I picked up the papers he had signed at the casino, the ones he thought were preliminary agreements for the investment. "You were so eager to prove your skin in the game that you signed a personal liability waiver," I explained. You pledged your future assets as collateral to secure the capital. The capital does not exist, but the debt you just assumed to cover the administrative fees and risk insurance for the joint venture is very real. You signed it over to a holding company called Nemesis LLC. So, Julian challenged, though his voice was thin, it is a fake company. I do not owe anything. Nemesis LLC is a fully registered debt collection agency. I smiled cruelly. And it is owned by me. You legally agreed to shoulder the costs of a failed merger. You mortgaged a future you do not have. Just then, his phone rang. The screen lit up with Clara's name. He grabbed it like a lifeline. Clara, baby, listen, there has been a huge mix-up. You bastard! Clara's voice screeched so loud I could hear it from where I stood. The police are here. They are putting me in a cell. They said the cards are stolen. They said you set me up. I told them everything. Julian, I told them about the embezzlement you bragged about. I told them everything. The line went dead. Julian slowly lowered the phone. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the true depth of his terror. He was sweating profusely, the expensive shirt clinging to his chest. As of this moment, I said, checking my watch, between the unauthorized use of company funds, the breach of contract penalties you just signed, and the theft of services at my hotel, you owe the Sterling Group approximately 2 million euros. Julian collapsed into the chair. His legs gave out. He looked at his hands, shaking uncontrollably. The arrogance was gone, scrubbed away by the harsh reality of bankruptcy and prison. He looked up at me, tears welling in his eyes. Alara, honey. He wheezed, reaching a trembling hand toward me. Please, we can fix this. I am sorry. I was stressed. I love you. Do not do this to our family. Think of Sophie. She needs her daddy. You cannot take me away from our little girl. The mention of her name snapped at the last thread of my patience. I leaned in, my face inches from his, my eyes burning with a fury that made him recoil. Do not mention her name, I growled, my voice low and dangerous. You left her in a roach-infested motel room with a stranger while you went to buy diamonds for your mistress. You did not even call to see if she had eaten dinner. You abandoned her. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the cracked, low-battery smartphone he had left me with in the field. I tossed it onto the table. It slid across the wood and hit his hand. Here, I said cold. This is the only asset you have left. I suggest you call a public defender. You are going to need one. The silence in the wine cellar was shattered by the heavy thud of boots on the stone stairs. The oak doors flew open, and 6 officers from the Brigade Financière stormed into the room. They moved with the swift, practiced efficiency of predators who had cornered their prey. My legal team had timed the notification perfectly. Julian Thorne, the lead officer barked, holding up a piece of paper stamped with the official seal of the Principality. You are under arrest. Julian scrambled backward, knocking over his chair. What? No, there is a mistake. I am a victim here. You are charged with aggravated financial fraud, forgery of commercial documents, and embezzlement of corporate assets. The officer continued, ignoring Julian's protests as 2 burly agents grabbed his arms. Get off me! Julian screamed, thrashing against their grip. He turned his wild eyes toward me, spitting saliva. She did it. It is her. She is the one behind all of this. She set me up. Why are you not arresting her? The officers did not even glance in my direction. To them, Julian was just another desperate criminal trying to deflect blame. I stood perfectly still, my face a mask of indifference, watching the man who had abandoned me in a field now squirming in the grip of the law. Stop resisting, one of the agents warned, snapping the handcuffs onto Julian's wrists. The metallic click echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. Ilara, Julian howled, panic finally setting in. Tell them who you are. You can stop this. I am stopping this, I said coldly. I am stopping you. I walked over to the table where Henry had laid out the final document. It was not a plea deal. It was a unilateral divorce petition. I picked up the pen, the nib scratching loudly against the paper in the sudden silence. I am signing this based on irrefutable evidence of adultery, abandonment, and economic abuse, I stated, looking him dead in the eye. I have the receipts. Julian, I have the video of you and Clara. I have the logs of every cent you stole. I signed my name with a flourish. Ilara Sterling. Henry stepped forward, smoothing his tie. He leaned in close to Julian's ear, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that carried a chilling weight. Mr. Thorne, I should inform you that the French courts are notoriously harsh on financial predators. For the scale of fraud you have committed, you are looking at 10 years in prison. Good luck. Julian's face went slack. The rage drained out of him, replaced by a sheer hollow terror. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw him truly understand the magnitude of his mistake. His eyes shifted from anger to a pathetic, begging despair. Ilara, he choked out, his voice breaking. Please, do not let them. The officers hauled him toward the door. He stumbled, his expensive shoes dragging on the stone floor, a broken man being led to his fate. I watched him disappear into the shadows of the stairwell, feeling absolutely nothing but a sense of completed business. I turned back to the table where Thomas, the actor who had played the Baron, was removing his monocle. That was a master class, Thomas, I said, a small smile finally touching my lips. You played his ego perfectly. He made it easy, Madame, Thomas replied, dropping the Austrian accent. The money has been received. The fee and a significant bonus have been transferred. I confirmed. I turned and walked up the stairs, pushing open the heavy door to the street. The night air of Monaco hit my face, cool and smelling of the sea and jasmine. It felt different tonight. It tasted like freedom. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out to see a notification from a global news aggregator. Breaking American businessman arrested in Monaco high-stakes fraud scandal. The story was already live. Photos of Julian being shoved into the police car were spreading across social media. His reputation was being dismantled in real time, pixel by pixel. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and walked toward the waiting car. The nightmare was over. The black sedan pulled up to the main entrance of Le Grand Hotel. But this time, I did not shrink into the background. I stepped out, not as the wife of a loudmouthed tourist, but as the owner. The rotating doors were held open, and a line of staff stood in perfect formation in the lobby. The atmosphere had shifted. They knew. I walked straight to the front desk, where the manager who had smirked at Julian's antics was now sweating profusely. He bowed low, unable to meet my eyes. Madame Sterling, he stammered. We are honored to have you. Save it, I said, my voice calm but cutting. You allowed a guest to verbally abuse your staff and create a scene because you thought he had money. That is not the standard of the Sterling collection. I turned to the assistant manager, a young woman who had looked sympathetic when Julian was screaming earlier. You are in charge now, I told her. Pack his things. I nodded toward the former manager. He is terminated effective immediately. Leaving the stunned silence of the lobby behind, I took the private elevator to the presidential suite. The room was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of nightlights. I walked into the master bedroom where Sophie was curled up in the center of the massive bed, clutching her favorite teddy bear. She looked so small, so innocent. The knot of anxiety that had been in my chest for days finally loosened. I kicked off my heels and climbed into the bed, wrapping my arms around her. For the first time in years, I slept without the fear of Julian's criticism waking me up. The next morning, the sun over Monaco was blindingly bright. I stood at a podium set up on the hotel's terrace, facing a sea of reporters. I wore a navy power suit, my hair loose and waving in the sea breeze. Good morning, I said into the microphone, I am Ilara Sterling Vance. For years, I have operated in the shadows to protect my family's privacy. However, recent events have necessitated a change in leadership strategy. Camera shutters clicked like a swarm of cicadas. Today, I am announcing a complete restructuring of Vance Global Logistics. I continued, my voice steady. We are cutting dead weight. We are liquidating underperforming assets and removing toxic elements that have hindered our growth. This applies to both our corporate structure and my personal portfolio. I did not say his name. I did not need to. The journalists knew exactly who the toxic element was. Back in the suite, my old phone, the one I had retrieved from Julian, was vibrating across the table. It was a relentless stream of calls and texts. Julian's mother, his frat brothers, his enablers. They were calling to scream, to beg, to demand answers. Ilara, what is going on? Julian is in jail. Pick up. You cannot do this. He is your husband. I picked up the device, looking at the names flashing on the screen. These were the people who had told me I was lucky to land him. The people who laughed when he made jokes about my cooking or my appearance. I did not answer. I simply powered the device down, removed the SIM card, and dropped the phone into the trash can. Mommy! Sophie tugged on my jacket. Can we go see the boats? Yes, baby. I smiled, taking her hand. Let us go see the boats. We walked down to the harbor, the salt air filling our lungs. The port was filled with luxury vessels, but I led Sophie toward the end of the private pier, where a sleek, 150-foot yacht named the Phoenix was docked. Is that ours? Sophie asked, her eyes widening. It is, I said, and we can go wherever we want. My new secure phone buzzed with a single encrypted message from my lawyer. Bail denied. Flight risk. He is being held at the Maison d'Arrêt. Prosecution is pushing for the maximum sentence. Upon release, he will be deported immediately. He has 0 assets remaining. He is finished. I read the words twice. There was no pity, only a sense of balance being restored to the universe. We stood at the edge of the dock, looking down at the deep blue water. I held the tiny SIM card from the old phone between my thumb and forefinger. It held the last link to Julian Thorne, his number, his contacts, his world. Mommy, what is that? Sophie asked. Just some old garbage, I said softly. I flicked my wrist. The small chip caught the sunlight for a brief second before it vanished into the churning water of the Mediterranean. I watched the ripples fade, then turned my back to the sea. Come on, Sophie, I said, lifting her into my arms. Let us go start our life. The Mediterranean wind whipped through my hair, tasting of salt and expensive champagne. It had been exactly 72 hours since I stood in a cloud of choking dust on a lonely road in Provence. The contrast was so sharp it almost felt like a hallucination. Back then, I was a trembling wife afraid of her husband's temper. Now, standing on the teak deck of my 150-foot yacht, I was something else entirely. I closed my eyes and breathed in. The fear was gone. In its place was a quiet, unshakable power. Sending Julian to prison was necessary. It was justice. But as I watched the coastline of France fade into a purple bruise on the horizon, I realized that the jail sentence was not the real revenge. The true victory was this. It was standing here, whole and unbroken. It was the realization that I did not need him to survive. I never did. He was an anchor I had been dragging for years, and now that the chain was cut, I was finally floating. Small footsteps padded against the deck. Sophie ran toward me, her hair a tangled mess of curls. She hugged my legs, burying her face in the fabric of my white linen trousers. She looked up, her eyes wide and full of that innocent confusion that breaks a mother's heart. "Mommy, where is Daddy? Is he coming on the boat?" she asked. I crouched down to her level. I did not want to lie. but I refused to burden her with the ugly truth of his crimes. I brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "No, sweetie. Daddy. Daddy chose a different path," I said softly. "He has to go away for a long time." "Why?" she whispered. "Because he forgot how to take care of the people who loved him," I replied, looking deep into her eyes. "But you and we are going to go on our own path, a path where no one ever gets left behind." Sophie nodded, accepting the answer with the resilience only children possess, and ran off to chase a seagull that had landed near the railing. Henri approached silently, holding a silver tray. On it lay a single envelope. The paper was cheap and rough. It had been forwarded from the detention center. "It just arrived via courier, Madame, from Mr. Thorne," Henri said. I picked it up. My hands did not shake. I tore it open. The handwriting was frantic, scribbled in a rush. "Alara, please." "You have to listen. It was the stress, the pressure. I never meant to hurt you. I am a victim of circumstance here. Just come visit me. One visit. We can work this out. I love you." I stopped reading. It was the same song, just a different verse. He was still blaming the world. He was still trying to manipulate me. I did not finish the sentence. I pulled a gold lighter from my pocket and flicked the wheel. The flame danced in the wind. I held the corner of the paper to the fire. It caught instantly, curling into black flakes. I held it until the heat kissed my fingertips. Then I let it go. The wind caught the ashes, scattering Julian's desperate pleas into the vast, indifferent ocean. I turned to Henri, who was waiting for orders. "Henri, contact the legal team in Zurich," I commanded. "I want all of Sophie's trust funds renamed immediately. Remove the name Thorne from every document. She is a Vance now. We are cutting all ties, legally, financially, and emotionally." "Consider it done, Madame," Henri replied with a nod. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood, orange, and violet. I stood up and straightened my vest. I looked forward, toward Italy, toward the future. There would be no sequel to this drama. There would be no second chances for the man back in that cell. There was only this moment. The yacht's engines hummed a deep, powerful rhythm, cutting through the waves with unstoppable force. I was Alara Vance, and I was finally free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on Julian's fate. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.